10,000 years of the development of human civilization has had the massive impact of reducing the total amount of life on the planet by more than 50%. So best available science at the moment suggests there's around 550 billion tons of living carbon on the planet. And if we've lost more than half of it, that's a deficit of 550 billion tons. So how do you develop a plan to deal with all of that? Well, first off, we're out there trying to tell a story, and that's the Envisionation Biosphere Restoration Plan.
Hi, I'm Herb Simmens, and you are with me today, as many of you are every week, at the Climate Emergency Forum. Today, we have a big question, and the question is, can we restore the biosphere? And we have someone with us who claims that we can. And that's what we'll be hearing from today and questioning him on his ambitious approach to looking at the whole planet and the biosphere. So stay tuned. I also wanted to say that this is part of a series of programs that's really sort of, we're shifting at least temporarily towards sort of big picture, very bold discussions. We just had one on can we cool India, 100 and, over a billion people. And we had one before that on how can we restore the health of lakes all over the world. And we had a new paper that's being published that talks about a new strategy for restoring the climate. So this is Bru within the sort of spirit of big ideas, bold initiatives. And why are we doing this? Because that's the only way we're going to be able to deal with the climate emergency that is the focus of this program. So I welcome you all today. Particularly, I want to introduce Bru Pearce, who I've gotten to know a bit over the last couple of years. Bru is from the southwest of England. I'm not going to say too much about his background because that's what I'm going to ask him to talk about, except to say that he's come to biosphere restoration not from the climate scientist perspective that many others have had, but from a very unique vantage point all over the world. So I'm delighted that you're here today, Bru, rather. I'm going to turn it over to you. Bru, tell us a little bit about yourself, how in the world you got involved with biosphere restoration, and at least begin to tell us what some of the key issues and perspectives are. And then we'll hear, as we always do, from Paul Beckwith and myself, and what we expect will be a very stimulating and we hope important conversation. So with that, the floor is yours, Bru.
Well, Herb, thank you very much. And Paul, good to see you. So the biosphere, the whole thing. I've had a yachting career. I had a career building marinas and ports. I've traveled around the world extensively. I've always been aware of my environment, but I got whacked by Hurricane Ivan in 2004, which turned out as a business disaster. It hit the island of Grenada and set everything back. And as a result of that, I wanted to have answers to the question, climate change, how fast and how bad? And nobody could really answer. One thing led to another, and I got deeper into the subject. With anything that's not functioning as it should, the starting point is to understand how it works in the first place. So I met with Jim Lovelock way back and really grasped Gaia theory. I'm also completely dyslexic, so I tend to pull ideas together and I stay away from too much detail. But as we see it, life can be looked at as a single entity. It's all interlinked. It's a molecular engineering organism. Life started out on this coagulated lump of space junk we call Earth. Using its molecular engineering skills, it's evolved itself and it built its environment as it went. So life, and we're part of it, is the ultimate geoengineer. And as you look deeper into it, you see that literally as life has evolved, life has changed the environment. We couldn't have lived on the Earth 4 billion years ago. But if you go back or consider yourself, we're each one of us, by definition of the fact that we're alive and looking at this, part of an unbroken chain of events that's 4 billion years long. So the interconnections are there, and the understanding of how it all works together, becomes fairly obvious. It's from that interconnection, you then look at, well, what's happened to it and how does it function? So in the nearer term past, and I say nearer term past, the last 5 million years or so, when the planet has been, and the continents have been in their current configuration, where we've been moving through ice ages and the planet has gradually cooled. And perhaps I should look at the last 600,000 years, where we've gone through these ice age cycles, which are cyclic, much as the cycle between summer and winter. All the life that's around now has evolved to live through those periods with those sort of levels of atmospheric gases. And it's evolved to deal with that. So in these great cycles that happen. And talking of cycles of life, it's a feature of life that everything goes through its cycles. That lump of space junk is only there because previous solar systems and galaxies have gone through their life cycles to create the elements that our current life works with and builds. Those are the patterns of nature. Envisionation, which is my organization, which was formed about 15, 16 years ago, has itself evolved over time. We set out to look at those questions of climate change, environmental degradation, how fast, how bad. And through that, we've developed a very extensive network of connections. So what we've brought together is very much a team effort, and we've worked to join the dots. Now, we're considering the whole Earth system in this. So we need to think about how human society works, how it's evolved, how we function, and then ask the big question of, well, one, what has our impact been? 10,000 years of the development of human civilization has had the massive impact of reducing the total amount of life on the planet by more than 50%. So best available science at the moment suggests there's around 550 billion tons of living carbon on the planet. And if we've lost more than half of it, that's a deficit of 550 billion tons of living carbon. And when I talk about living carbon, I'm talking about carbon molecules that are actually mounted in things that are alive as opposed to things that have passed on to death or turned into rocks. And as I indicated initially, life works in an integrated way to geoengineer and manage its own environment. In fact, it's a feature of life, wherever you look, that it tends to reach out, colonize, and stabilize. So everybody knows that. I mean, the forests on the side of a mountain will stabilize the mountain slope. Planting on the edge of a river will stabilize the river. Therefore, you can look at the life on the planet as its own climate management system. And then consider, we've reduced the size of that climate management system, that climate management engine, to half of what it was. And we strongly suspect that the reason things are moving fast now and everything's on an exponential curve is that we've reached the point where the systems become overwhelmed. Nature, through its diversity, creates its own stability. And as you destroy the diversity, you lose the stability. And that's where we believe we are. So how have we got into this position? Well, the overarching reason is, of course, that we failed as various societies to put in place laws to protect our environment. Now, a lot of that is understandable, but as we've become more and more enlightened and we've known about this, it becomes very clear that it ought to be illegal to plow all your pollution into the atmosphere and to put it in the rivers and let it flow into the seas. Dilution is not the answer. Dilution only lasts you so long. And now we have hugely polluted oceans. We've broken the nutrient cycles. We've reduced the total amount of life. And life was functioning by circulating all those nutrients in a very sophisticated way. You think of the vast numbers of seabirds that have been lost and the guano trade that used to exist and the amount of material that was moved around the planet. And as we break the natural ecological systems, we break that nutrient cycling process. So we should put in place laws to protect the environment. And for that reason, we work closely with the Stop Ecocide campaign and Jojo Mehta and Polly Higgins, who set that up originally, who's sadly died, I think it's 5 years ago now, of cancer. A lovely girl. But that is a really powerful, important initiative. Delighted to see that Scotland is putting in place a law of ecocide. The European Union is debating it. Several of the small island states are implementing it. Ecuador is moving in that direction. And if you make large-scale pollution and damage to the environment illegal, then you create lots of business and job opportunities for dealing with that pollution and creating the recycling economy. So at the moment, we have a totally extractive economy, and that needs to change. So how do you develop a plan to deal with all of that? Well, first off, we're out there trying to tell a story, and that's the Envisionation Biosphere Restoration Plan. And we're developing what we describe as empathy economics. And empathy economics is about legal structures, which are the base of everything, the ability to monitor and measure what you're doing, because otherwise you can't put the evidence in place to support those legal structures. Once you've got that in place, you can then start developing a financial system which has real integrity. Right now, global financial structures are frankly fraudulent. All our governments go around talking about growth, but it's not growth because it carries massive contingent liabilities, which is the cost of restoring the damage that we've done. So we need to build a global financial structure that recognizes the true cost and real value of every action.
Okay, let me stop you there, Bru. You made a number of very provocative and important comments that I'm sure Paul will be eager to address, and as will I. I just sort of wanted to start by saying that what I didn't hear, and this isn't a criticism, it's just an observation, in your opening comments was anything to do with carbon and carbon pollution and climate change directly. So tell us a little bit about. It sounds like your focus is certainly, I assume it does not exclude carbon combustion and all the other greenhouse gases, but is a much broader one that's based upon if we restore enough of life, as Jim Lovelock, the brilliant British inventor and scientist who passed away at 103, 104 a couple of years ago, has articulated. I think what you're saying, if we find a way through ecocide laws and changing our economic structure and other things I'm sure you'll talk about to basically rejuvenate and regenerate the missing life in all its forms, that will by itself largely restore the climate and restore the biosphere. Is that a fair statement, or am I simplifying or exaggerating?
No, it's a fair statement because 550 billion tons of additional life on the planet will reside on 550 billion tons of carbon. And that carbon will come out of the atmosphere and out of the oceans as off gases as the partial pressure changes. And it accommodates a pretty large chunk of the emissions that we are committed to. So it's going to take you back down to around 300 parts per million. The sums are fairly straightforward. Anybody can do it. I can give you a slide of them. Now, restoring a fully functioning ecosystems takes a little longer. Growing trees takes a lot of time. But we can do things very fast in the ocean. The next part of this is how do you achieve it?
Yes.
Okay, so let's look at the economics of this. On our current course, we are in serious danger of total societal collapse. The global food crisis coming down the road, it could turn into the world of Mad Max very, very easily. And if that happens, every asset, every banking asset, everything else becomes worthless. All will be lost. Alternatively, if you restore your biosphere and you think about the biosphere, that is our ultimate asset, a healthy biosphere upon which all human endeavor is totally reliant. Next, how do you get there? You'd have to develop a plan, and the starting point of any plan is to have a target. Now, the good news is there's an agreed target already. It's the UN Sustainable Development Goals, signed up to by 195 countries. If you look at those goals and consider what it means if you deliver them all, it means we will have a planet with 9 billion people on it, well, at a billion, by 2050, all living well, as opposed to about 2.8 billion of us who live well now and everybody else struggling. Now, the unarguable economic position of that, if you create that situation, is an enormous growth in global GDP. The way to that is to greatly increase the productivity of the land and the oceans. And that productivity comes once you start restoring nutrient cycles and hydrological cycles. So consider that the whole of the North African coast 2,000 years ago was forested, 1,000 miles deep. Consider that the whole of the UK, when the Romans arrived, was totally forested. Consider the loss of forest in the Americas. Start bringing that back, the space is available. How do you do it with 9 billion people? Well, this is where technology and our knowledge suddenly comes into play, because we now have the knowledge and the molecular engineering capability, which is now reflected and growing in us, to deliver pretty well any protein we like in almost any amount through precision fermentation and vertical farming and other systems. We can feed 9 billion people on a fraction of the land we use now, and that frees up that land for rewilding and the drawdown of that carbon. So what we've got to do is persuade the big money out there, which frankly at the moment just laughs at us when we come in our sandals and our eco-friendly ideas, and get them to understand that very large-scale land restoration creates enormous wealth. What happens is the land productivity goes up as you irrigate it. You need energy, but our energy is pretty well limitless through renewables now, and the cost of energy is diving. Efficiency goes racing up with artificial intelligence, humanoid robots, and all these other things that are coming into play. We have the knowledge and the skills, and done correctly, then villages and towns grow and expand. And this is business 101. You have an idea and you go to your bank manager and say, lend me a bit of money, I'll do X, Y, and Z, and I'll make more money and it'll be worth so much at the end. You take a plot of land and you have a plan and you go along and say, this is what I want to build, and this is what it's going to be worth when I build it, and this is what it's going to cost to get there, and this is the difference. And the bank manager says, fine. We need the really big finance houses to wake up to this.
I don't know if any of the big money is watching this program today, but if you are, make sure you have Bru's email address. It sounds like you're trying to have a sort of synthesis of large amounts of capital, of the highest of the new frontiers of technology, such as precision fermentation and presumably other kinds of
Yep.
AI-based intelligence that increases productivity, but not in the service of more consumer goods, of more junk that we consume often pointlessly, but in the service of restoration of the underlying ecosystem that supports all your life. That seems to me that sort of, I'm sure I'm dramatically oversimplifying, but it's kind of what I'm hearing and what you've said so far. I see you nodding. So with that nod, I want to turn it over to Paul. Paul, as everyone knows, who watches regularly, is a climate system scientist who lives in Ottawa and who's taught in Ottawa and in the area. He's the developer, creator, and implementer week after week of a very popular YouTube channel focused on every aspect of the climate change. And having worked with you now for Paul for all these months, I know that you often will think out of the climate box on AI and other subjects and technology. So I'm just looking forward to your interchange with Bru. So the floor is yours, Paul.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, well, first of all, a word to these, big financial people that are watching. We'll happily accept donations for our channel. Is the
That's right.
first
We want
thing, as Bru
10%.
will as well. And so, Bru, I'm interested in we had 1,100 gigatons of living carbon 100 years ago, and now we're half
Well,
that. Do you know the distribution? You did mention that ocean restoration would probably be quicker, and I think that's very true. I think the number thrown out is that we've lost 90% of the large creatures that used to live in the ocean, the big whales and so on. We're down 90%, and we know there are methods to get better nutrients at the surface and, try to restore biomass in the ocean. I would think from first glance that we've probably destroyed more biomass on land in terms of in the trees and vegetation because we live on the land, but we've also, the fishing has done, the marine biomass greatly cut that down. So do you have an idea or a feel for, how do we restore that 550? Is most of it going to be in the oceans? Is it going to be a breakdown between the oceans and the land, roughly equal? What are you thinking of on those sort of lines?
Okay, well, it's an interesting thing. I'm simplifying it because of the 550. Living carbon acts in very different ways. In actual fact, the percentage of living carbon in the ocean, which is active and is running the climate, is very high. The percentage on land is much lower because an awful lot of the on-land living carbon is actually just supporting the active, really active living carbon. So the wood in a tree is a store of carbon. The leaves and the sap and the bark and the roots are the bits that are really doing the work. It's those working bits which are incredibly important. Now, in the oceans, we've actually lost an enormous amount. Part of our studies was going back over the accounts of the early explorers. Captain Cook's log is all available online. And there are anecdotes in there where people are describing what they saw back in the 1700s. And there's also the accounts of the first fisheries off the Newfoundland banks. When they first got there, people were scooping cod out of the water with a basket. There are accounts of ships that are being slowed up and can't sail through shoals of fish. Now that's gone. One of the slides I put up
Yeah.
is a map of whaling grounds from 1870. That map includes the abandoned whaling grounds where they've already fished it out.
Yeah, I mean, I like the stories, people could literally almost walk on water because there were so many fish in the water. I mean, you and I, we go back, I guess, to AMEG, the Arctic Methane Emergency
Yes.
Group, from many, many years ago. I'm interested in your yachting. I mean, so your knowledge of the ocean and changes is quite significant, being yachting, being on the ocean. The yachting that's in the news right now involves Greta Thunberg
Yeah.
along with 12 other people trying to sail with supplies to Gaza. It'll be interesting to see how far they get. But the oceans have changed. I mean, the ocean currents are changing. The AMOC's slowing down. The intertropical convergence zone, the band of thunderstorms and near the equator, it shifts with the seasons, but climate change is definitely affecting that. The AMOC does actually shut down, and the tropics get much warmer. The southern hemisphere does. So all these distributions of where heat is on the planet and how it moves, that's all changing. We've talked about the jet streams a lot and so on. So I guess the thing is that the restoration of the biosphere, will go a long way to balancing the carbon where the carbon is, less in the atmosphere and oceans, more in biosphere. But those things are going to take a fairly long time frame. So have you looked at the time frames of the restoration, and do you think that we actually need to go to things like solar radiation management to buy us time to try to restore the biosphere?
Yes, we may have to, but actually, solar radiation management by using living things is the best and safest way to do it. Now, the oceans are warming very, very fast at the moment, and what we're really looking at is a change in the cloud formation over the oceans. There's less cloud. It's phytoplanktons and the release of diethyl sulfide and other small particles and other zooplankton, which are releasing lipids onto the surface of the ocean, which control the rates of evaporation and control the formation of clouds. The number of nuclei for droplet formation and the size of them controls the color and the density of those clouds. So bringing back that phytoplankton, putting the right nutrients in place so we get the right plankton, then you can start to manage the cloud formation. Now, the same is true of the forests and understanding that the biotic pump, the evapotranspiration, and the nuclei that are released by the fungal spores and by the trees themselves, they control cloud formation. And in fact, Herb, we're going to be at the Global Tipping Points Conference in Exeter at the end of June. And Rob and I have now got a team of 5 of us going, including Tim Smith. And we're putting forward proposals to use the Eden Project to upscale Peter Bunyard's experiments to prove out how that works and get more critical knowledge on it. And I'm hoping that we'll persuade one or two of the people who are building natural capital funds to get involved in that, because having evidence to show how forests can help cool the planet is going to be really important to their cause. So although trees take a long time to grow, there's an awful lot of grasses and bushes and shrubs which can grow very fast, and you can restore soil very quickly by nurturing the nutrients. This is biochar, rock dusts, how we manage the soil, how we manage the watershed on it, and then what we can deliver with energy. We're going to have to generate 10 times as much energy as we have now. And that process through renewables is going to shake up the global economic system, because countries like Mauritania, who have limitless amounts of sunlight, are actually going to be wealthy. And if we implement laws of ecocide and put pressure on the polluters, then those hydrocarbon assets become stranded, but we get massive dynamic economic shifts across the planet. That's going to be the really interesting side of it. This is how do we build our Earth system accounting structure with integrity. Now, we've been working with the International Center for Earth Simulation. This is Bob Bishop, who's one of the original founders of Silicon Graphics Foundation. And every 2 years, he brings 50 to 60 of the world's leading climate scientists, computer modelers together to debate that and work on how we bring the various massive computer groups together, and how we're going to deal with all the satellite data and the agricultural data and the societal commercial data to build a digital twin of the planet. That's critical infrastructure so that we know what we're doing. Instead of carrying out this blind experiment of pouring all these pollutants into the system, we urgently need that data. And with that, it will allow us to build that Earth system accounting structure. Now, our own move on this to try and kick off our plan and to support empathy economics and to democratize it is that we're launching a digital asset we call an empathy coin. And we're underway with that. Right now, we're getting people to donate into it, but those people that donate will airdrop tokens to them. And building that into that Earth system economics, we're proposing to airdrop tokens to all the people that have helped in developing the plan, and indeed people who are working on restoration. So we're trying to put in place an infrastructure that allows all these things to happen, that allows true cost and real value to be recognized and compensated. So there was a very interesting interview with the president of Guyana, who was being given a hard time because they're pulling out huge amounts of hydrocarbons. They've got oil coming off their coast. And he turned around and said, "We have a country which is as big as England and Scotland together, and it's all forest, and we've preserved it, and we're preserving the biomass. And you've got a damn cheek telling us not to take our hydrocarbons out when you're not paying us for the Earth system services we're giving you by preserving our forest." This is where we need to move towards. If Brazil and Ecuador and the Congo are compensated for the service they're providing to the users, and they pay for it, then we start building a global economic structure which will allow us to thrive. And actually, it's going to be a great life. There will be, the machines will take over. They will do an awful lot of the jobs. We will have more free time. We will become the clients of the machines because they will entertain us, and we'll have time for arts and science and sport and thinking, and humanity can thrive.
As long as we have a basic universal income for people, and I hope that
Yes.
the Earth Sims or Sim Earth, right? Remember the game Sim City, Sim Earth? I hope when the modeling is done that you provide a game for young teenagers can load up on their phones and play this and figure out how the Earth works, right? It could be a big educational tool for
Absolutely.
people.
I've had the conversation with Daniel Goldman, one of the people behind the Sims game, and yes, we have to teach that. Actually, we have to start teaching our kids the value, where we fit in to the whole map of life.
Yeah, because people are losing track of that, spending all their time on screens and so on.
The flower and the seed, we're what's going to take the DNA out into the solar system.
Mm.
That's the pattern of nature. colonize and stabilize, or stabilize and colonize. But we can't do it if if we don't protect our environment and value our primary asset, which is this thin membrane that surrounds that lump of space junk.
Bru, you're painting a picture that, Paul, you might correct me, but my guess is that it may be one of the most optimistic, or if not the most optimistic utopian picture we've heard on this channel, maybe ever. My question to you, if we bring you back, and we hope we will, I hope we'll all be here and thriving in say 5 or 10 years. And we said to you, Bru, so did you achieve in this next, we'll give you a whole decade, okay? My question is, if you came back in 10 years, assuming that the ideas you're planting have, have rooted and have sprouted, what might tangibly be different in 10 years that you could point to as compared to today, where almost every one of our programs, we talk about how close we are to climate collapse from a variety, whether it's the polar vortex or it's the loss of farmland and productivity and all the other things we talk about week after week. So if you're coming back in a decade and we all have a little more gray hair but we're still optimistic, and I say to you, Bru, what happened in the decade that you were able to support the achievement of?
I would like to think that we have stopped being afraid and our children's anxiety about the future has gone, and they're moving forward enthusiastically with hope and vigor and belief, and that they understand their place in nature.
This is a separate question, which is related to Herb's. You mentioned 9 billion people. I mean, we're at what, we're over 8,
Yep.
and we're heading to 9. It's hard to think of any way to avoid 9 unless there was a massive global plague or something like that. So, but where does it stop? I mean, it seems that a lot of the living biomass has been converted to human beings from other things, right?
Well,
We've come to dominate the biosphere in just about every way. So clearly this is like, I wouldn't aim to be able to support 9 or 10 billion people. I think we're going to have to, but that's probably too many people on the planet. So it's not like people are going to volunteer to leave.
delivering those UN Sustainable Development Goals is education, rights for women, better life. Everywhere in the more advanced world, populations are stable or dropping. And as we go down this path, populations will naturally drop and stabilize.
This scares a lot of people, right? This idea. And I don't think it should, right? I mean, exponential population growth, why should we continue that, right? Let's get a value that the biosphere can support and sustain.
But we can, it's energy. We know how to do it. I mean, we could probably sustain more than that. But I think going down this path, we will naturally see populations stabilize around the 9 billion and then probably start to fall a bit. And we will live longer, and who knows, we'll start getting integrated with machines. It'll be humanoid machines that leave our solar system first, I suspect. It will be a brave new world.
Well, on that brave new world note, Bru, for the many thousands of people who will be watching this, they're inspired. We hope they'll be inspired by your words today and by the projects that you're working on. What can they do? What can we do to help speed up and accelerate this very remarkably ambitious but necessary transition to a restored biosphere? What can folks do in their own lives or politically or otherwise?
First of all, please come to our website, envisionation.org. Consider getting involved. You can make a donation, but that donation will convert into an investment in Empathy Coin. They will end up on being traded. They'll be on the markets. They will represent a part of the Biosphere Restoration Plan. And then once the digital twin is in place, they will link to the literal health of the biosphere. And I'm sure other bigger, cleverer banking financial institutions will come on board and help with this. But if you think that Bitcoin is a currency that's been created in a matter of 12 or 13 years, and it's founded on a load of mathematical calculations, we're proposing that something should be founded on our ultimate asset. Think of the living carbon standard as opposed to the gold standard. This is far more logical. and have a part of that. Then the funding gets driven in the right direction. First thing we're doing is telling the story. So even if you don't come in and don't tell the story, spread the word. The kids and the young people desperately need hope. The level of anxiety about the future is enormous.
I think that's something we can all agree upon. It's not just the kids that need hope, but certainly particularly the kids that need hope.
Yeah.
And you've provided some of that hope today. I know in Kim Stanley Robinson's book, Ministry for the Future, he talks about a coin. I forgot the name of it right now, that would help use to basically for climate restoration as well. Basically, one of the institutions that gets overlooked in restoring the biosphere, restoring the climate, and restoring most everything else are the various central banks all over the world and the nature of the currency that they issue and whether they maybe in 10 years you will see on their websites articles about the empathy coin for the EU or the empathy coin for the Union of Africa or the empathy coin for the United States. So that seems a fair cry from where we are now in the
There we go.
US.
Yeah.
But
But
anyway, I like to dream big. That's why we brought you on here because you dream big as well. We look forward, some of us, including myself, to seeing you in Exeter at the Global Tipping Points Conference. My thanks to Paul today for as always, participating in your questions. Good luck to you, Bru. And of course, if you like this program, then please like it on YouTube, subscribe to our channel, and leave your comments, your questions, and your suggestions for future programs. Go to our website, climateemergencyforum.org, and take a look at the articles that are there. We would love if you could help support this organization by your donations. And as always, we thank you for participating, and we will see you next week. Bye bye.
bye bye. Thank you.